Good morning to you all, except for those of you who, or where it's not morning, actually. I realise that it's not morning in some places where some of you are tuning in from. So exploring attention this week and mindfulness, the way the sort of intersection between mindfulness and attention, and coming at it from a few different angles. But mainly drawing on, or at least sometimes drawing on from Peak Mind, Dr. Amishi Shah's book. And yesterday I talked a little bit about the third of 3 attention systems that she talks about in the brain. And that's the juggler. It has several different names. I've forgotten quite why she refers to it as a juggler. But I think it's because it juggles sort of lots of different sort of functions and wishes. So the CEO, or the executive function of the mind, that which aligns us not with content. So the flashlight facility, the sort of capacity of attention to hone in on one thing, to the directed quality of the mind onto one thing. That's the flashlight aspect, and that's to do with being able to pick up what something is, or hone in on particular sort of content. And the second system being the floodlight, which she associates with time, because it's about the present moment. It's about being present to what's happening, but it's broader than the flashlight, this sort of torchlight beam. And so it's associated with the present moment and time, rather than being lost in the past and or taking ourselves forward into an imagined future. So the juggler aligns us with our goals and values, like this quality of sampajanya talked about yesterday. So knowing what we're doing and whether it's in line with what's most important to us, in our lives and in our practice. And it gives us this capacity to be, or she calls it decentering, but be less involved, less enmeshed with the content of experience with the flashlight and the past and future. So more present. So it allows us to be aware of what's happening in a slightly different way, this decentering. Again, I've referred to a couple of times being aware of something but not involved in it or lost in it. But another way of looking at decentering, which I would align with right view, if you like, a Dharma perspective, or a wiser perspective, a more helpful perspective on what's happening. So one way of looking at this is making a distinction between the content of what we hear and the mental processes that are going on. So sort of stepping back from the content. So content might be something like a dog barking or a car revving. You sort of got an image in the mind and a whole sort of lot of ideas about what that experience is. Seeing the computer in front of you. The process is less about the computer, and it's more about the seeing. And the process in relation to the dog barking is more about sound, more about hearing, rather than the idea in the mind of the dog barking, perhaps out of sight. You can't actually see it. So what the direct experience is of sound. So we're learning to distinguish between those two, content and process. Processes we can equate with a direct experience I talked about yesterday, more directly experiencing what's happening on a moment by moment basis. Things that are happening through the 5 physical senses and the mind sense. Whereas content, we equate again with concepts and ideas, thoughts about what's happening. And often these two are very enmeshed. We don't separate it out. But also habitually, the mind tends to prioritize, or what's prioritized in the mind is conceptualizing around experiences. Because perception, which is one of another omnipresent mental event like attention, it does its job really well. It categorizes, it labels, it cognizes what an experience is. It sort of wraps it up in this little parcel of neat ideas, and it relies quite heavily on what it's experienced in the past. That's how it can do it. Doesn't have to sort of start from scratch. So it's a very, very useful, essential faculty of the mind, capacity of the mind to think about what's happening, to have thoughts and ideas that sum up an experience very neatly. So what it means is that we rarely experience what the Buddha talks about when he says, in the seen, only the seen, in the heard, only the heard. So what we sometimes try and do in practice, and what will lean towards this morning, is paying more attention to the direct experience. And this is important because the concepts are a best guess. They're a sort of secondary reality. They're not necessarily accurate in what they sum up, because they're relying on past experience. They're relying on this. Well, this is how it was in the past. This is what a dog bark sounds like. So that's what the mind can call it. That's what I know it as. But it may or may not be accurate. I was reading a really interesting book, which had another language. I was intrigued. It had another language for this content and processes, thoughts about and direct experience. And it was actually a book about philosophy. It was a history of global philosophy by someone called Julian Baggini, who I gather is a popular writer of philosophy. And I think it's a chapter called How the World Thinks he was writing about. And he makes a distinction between what he calls acquaintance and description. And he's talking about philosophy in Japan. And one of the things I found interesting in the book is that some cultures are much more likely to separate out philosophy from religion in quite a big way. And that's what we do in the West. Western philosophy has very little to do with religion. But in Japan and other cultures in the East, often they're part of philosophy. When you're talking about philosophy, you're also talking about religion. So he makes this distinction: acquaintanceship and description. So acquaintanceship is like having an acquaintance with something, being acquainted with something. So this is like having a direct experience of it. And then the thinking about, or the conceptualizing that I'm talking about, that's like describing something. And he makes the point, as I've just made really a few minutes ago, that acquaintance is primary, that you can't describe something without first having had an experience of it. So I think for me, it made it a little bit clearer, this whole direct experience and thinking about that you can't describe something, you can't have this, without first having had an experience, an acquaintanceship with it. And he then goes on to say, so this actually, what this means is that you can have an acquaintance with something, you can have an experience of something that can't be described. Not everything that is experienced, not everything we have acquaintance with, we can describe, we can conceptualize around. And in Japan, his subchapter is called the ineffable. And so this is what he's referring to when there's an experience, a spiritual experience or a subtle experience that we can't actually put into words. It's ineffable. So experience is primary, acquaintanceship is primary, it's closer to reality, it's closer to the ineffable. And so we use awareness, we use it actually as really simple tool to get closer to understanding the nature of the mind, the nature of ineffability. I hope that's a word. Through investigating in a non-discursive way. Of course, we use language, we use concepts, but as lightly as possible. What I call a lower concept load. And what we're doing is we're investigating or getting acquainted with our sense experience. And in Buddhism, of course, many of you will be aware, senses, the 5 physical senses, but the mind is also taken to be a sense. So how do we know anything in our world, in our experience? How do we know? So whatever we know it through our senses. We say things like, I know it. I saw it with my own eyes. I know it because I feel it, or I feel it when I touch it. It's there. Something is there to be experienced. And part of this is that others we have a commonly agreed reality with others through their own eyes, because they saw something too, or because we all heard it together. So maybe just take a couple of minutes now, perhaps to look at something, look away from the screen, look at something, and ask the question, how do I know this? How do I know? And is there any other answer beyond I'm seeing it, or if it's a sound, I can hear what I take to be birds on the roof of the building I'm in. May not be, maybe somebody in the flat, actually the flat above. A sound because I hear it. Or a sensation in the body. I know this is happening. I know this is real because I feel it. Because I know it. And not only do we take these things to be real or to be true, but we also attribute a sense of, well, I know this is happening. I can see this is happening. So we attribute these experiences to someone, the one who knows that they're happening. But I like to think about another realm of experience, which is when we dream. And in a dream, things can feel so real. We're seeing colors, we're feeling substances and textures. We hear the sound of voices. We have conversations in dreams. And there's a whole world in there, a whole world. But when we wake up and it's gone, and we realize, oh, it was only a dream. It was an illusion, even though even the residue of a dream can feel so real. But we know, oh, it's only a dream. And I think this can give us a clue to how we might be misreading our own experience. If a dream feels so real, but we clearly know it not to be real when we wake up. What if the same is true for normal waking life? We see it to be so real and so substantial because we haven't yet woken up. We haven't woken up to how things are, how things really are. We haven't awakened. So we can have a glimpse of a different perspective, a different way into what we take to be real. So that's what we're going to be exploring in a couple of minutes, in a few minutes. But just to say, on a relative level, I suppose, we benefit from mindfulness in a couple of different ways, but just on that relative level, that being more present more of the time, using those first two attention systems where we're in the present moment, we're knowing what's happening, perhaps in a more ordinary level. It does enliven and sort of brighten our experience. To have that flashlight, that attention a little bit more steady, it means that we can appreciate these experiences that we have, experiences of the senses more. And often you get that on retreat, and you get the sense that the colors look more vivid. The birds seem to be singing much more loudly than usual. We're really attuned to the senses, and that's a really lovely sort of fruit of mindfulness practice, as far as it goes, but it can go much further, because I think mindfulness gives us a way. It gives us a way in to look at, how do I say this, to look at. Or usually we're looking out from the mind, if you like. But with mindfulness practice, we're able to look back at what's actually happening, what's happening within the sort of processes and capacities of the mind sense, and that's feeding out through the physical senses. So we can come to, through our direct experience, we can come to understand the more subtle nature of the mind and subtle nature of the senses, sense experience, more momentary and ephemeral nature. And perhaps then naturally arises, we don't need to try and question, if you like, that sense of that I'm the one having all these experiences, but actually just through yeah, there's this presence, and with the sense of relating more to processes, tuning into processes more strongly than the usual content, then yeah, we can have a different different understanding, different experience. So before we go on to the meditation, are there any questions about or comments so far? Feel free to put your hand up, and otherwise we will get straight to it. I know it's very early in the morning to be thinking about questions. Good. Okay, let's go into the meditation. And what we're going to do actually is a few different meditative explorations. So I'm going to pause after the first two and just give you a chance to reflect on what you noticed. We won't say anything at that point, but it just gives you a chance to reflect, and then we'll carry on. And that's partly because the third exercise we'll do with eyes open. Just going to mute myself while I fiddle with a few wires. Okay. Okay, I think someone may not be, maybe unmuted. So if you could just check. Taking time to arrive, taking time not to do anything, but just to be in your posture, a relaxed open way, perhaps making any adjustments that you need to. It can be helpful to start with your eyes open. One of the things it does, starting with our eyes open, is that we don't go into something of an automatic meditation mode. Don't assume the position in a slightly automatic way. But whether your eyes are open or closed, let's see if you can notice any tendency to that automatic, just getting on with it once you're physically in the posture. And perhaps just allow yourself to come to presence. Perhaps noticing where the attention, that undirected attention, noticing where it naturally is. Noticing attention from a very settled back, relaxed way of being, way of looking. And in the first of these exercises, just letting the attention come to rest at different points in the body. And perhaps noticing the quality of energy or effort that you're using. To notice what's happening within the body. And we want a really light, open attending. Perhaps think of attending and being aware of what's happening rather than making a particular effort. But relaxing and reducing any unnecessary effort. And notice where the awareness goes, where the attention goes in the body. Inhabiting, embodying different sensations. And tuning in really gently to the direct experience, those sensations. Wherever you notice them, in what we call body. But what's the actual experience in terms of temperature, pulsing, tingling? Contact. It's hard or soft, smooth or rough. Moist or dry. And you may find that labels come to label parts of the body or types of sensation. Let's see if you can lean in a little bit more to the actual experience. And dial down a little the labeling, conceptualizing, describing mind. It will carry on, let it carry on. Tune into the feel of the body. One of the ways that we can conceptualize around an experience is attributing a location. Something's happening down there or in here. And just notice if the mind is doing this, very natural. Recognizing it as subtle conceptualizing. And leaning again into what can be directly known. And now from a place of more groundedness, more embodiment and relaxation, tune into the sense of hearing. Sounds happening. Noticing how automatic it is for the mind to try and label sounds. And notice any sense of reaching out towards a sound. And see if we can simply know what's happening from a very settled back, resting and relaxing, knowing sounds. Knowing sounds, knowing silence. And notice any subtle difference between hearing and listening. Both are quite natural to the mind. Perhaps listening involves a narrow, more directed attention, putting a flashlight on an aspect of experience. And hearing is broader, softer, using the floodlight. Is there a difference in the amount of energy or tension involved in hearing, listening? And not necessarily trying to answer questions, but just allowing the questions to interest the mind in what's happening. Notice any trying to hear or to listen. Notice that, how that trying manifests in the body, in the mind. The sound is happening anyway. If we have the ability to hear, simply being present is enough. No more effort needed. Just relax into knowing sound as sound. And we can also tune in to the space between sounds. Sound of silence. body touch sensations and hearing. Happening from one moment to the next. I'm just taking a moment or two as we shift into the next exercise to notice how the mind is now, how the mind and body, anything you've noticed and were interested in, aware of. And if the visual sense is not accessible to you, stay with the touch sensations and hearing. But otherwise, open your eyes. Don't look at the screen, but see if you can look elsewhere. And let the eyes be really soft. So the seeing is soft. Again, not trying to see. Seeing is happening. Let the eyes be soft and the vision be broad, seeing out of the corner of the mind's eye, almost like seeing around corners. So you're more aware of the peripheral vision than usual. And seeing is often where we identify strongly with the conceptual mode, the things that we see. So notice if that's happening. Notice the mind conceptualizing around what's being seen. And again, lean into that sense of simply knowing that seeing is happening. Colors, shapes, forms. Let there be a relaxation of that mind that's always trying to make sense of what it sees, what it hears, what it touches. You could think of seeing through the whole body. And you might like to explore the difference between seeing and looking, the more active and directed looking. You could try looking at something and see how long you can sustain the looking. Without staring at something, without tension or trying. And then opening up from awareness of the visual sense and including sounds, touch sensations, including mind objects, the feel of the mind. How a thought or image feels in the mind. Very gently noticing, or you might notice the mind perceiving, labeling, knowing. The mind that's knowing experiences. And for the last few minutes of the practice, just sitting open to the sense experience, including the mind sense. Noticing whatever happens from this settled, relaxed, open perspective. And I'm going to finish the session by just reading something from Charlotte Yoko Beck. It's not that I hear the birds, it's just hearing the birds. Let yourself be hearing, seeing, thinking. It is the false I that interrupts the wonder with the constant desire to think about I. And all the while, the wonder is occurring. The birds sing, the cars go by, the body sensations continue. The heart is beating. Life is a second by second miracle, but dreaming our I dreams, we miss it. Okay, so we have a few minutes, 10 minutes or so. If there's anyone who would like to either say something about what they noticed, what you noticed in practice. Maybe we'll start with that, and then after a few of those, see if there are any questions from the session. So if you can put your electronic hand up, if you'd like to say something, that would be great. Jnana Rajni, you'd like to, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but I'm sure you'll be unmuted at some point. You can't unmute yourself? Yes.
I think so, yes. I must say thank you so much, Vajradevi. I feel a bit nervous about sort of talking about my experience like this, but I was quite, it was quite a journey. I started feeling really sleepy and wanting to sleep. So I observed this mind that seemed to have this focus on wanting to sleep. And then there was the other mind that tried to find strategies to wake up. And I used having my eyes open. If I closed my eyes, would have been impossible. And having the open eyes, I could see through the slats in my blind, just a little bit from the outside. And that was what the mind responded to, the movement, in fact, of the leaves just the little strips of leaves that I could see. And the birds that would sort of shoot by. And I had this incredible experience of just wonder.
Mm.
There was this, well, I could use the word gladdening of the mind, really. It was gladdened of this wonder.
Yeah.
And yes, it wasn't a continuous, but it certainly changed the state where I started from.
Mm.
I just wanted to say that. And,
yeah.
And I know what it is. It was just your guidance that helped the mind to steady itself onto whatever in the end I chose to steady it with. But it was that process, I felt, that cleared something and revealed this wondrous world, actually. So thank you so much.
Yeah. I just throw something in, and so there's no doubt that, yeah, there's beauty in the world. I do remember being in Burma, and the teacher in Burma, and coming back from, I might have told you this story, coming back from a day in Yangon, which was then the capital of Burma, coming back and saying to the teacher, "Oh, Yangon is so beautiful," and him laughing and saying, "It's not Yangon that's beautiful," because Yangon was a little bit, it is a very colourful city, but it's also very, there's a lot of poverty. It's very broken down. It's very smelly. And he said, "It's not Yangon that's beautiful. It's your mind." Yeah. So just to put that in there as well, it's the quality of the mind. And you referred to it when you said it's steadied, but it's yeah. So the mind becomes beautiful through paying attention, and then what it sees, it sees, we see through that lens, don't we? That lens of
yes,
qualities
amazing.
of the mind. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. There was a question in the chat just for the name of the reading. It's Charlotte Yoko Beck. So she's a Zen meditation teacher, Dharma teacher. She has a couple of very lovely books, actually, quite hardcore in a way. She's quite uncompromising. That's the word I'm looking for. But I found them very inspiring. I can't actually remember the name of any of them. But yeah, Charlotte Yoko, Joko Beck. 3 words. Anyone else like to either say anything? Yeah, great. Sorry, I can't quite get that.
Vimukta
Shri, great.
Yeah. I found it really quite interesting. Particularly, I'd just say, when you said about sound, I realised that before, in a way, although your voice had been there, and I was aware of awareness. I was aware of awareness, and then I just think that when you said about the sound, I thought, well, my brain started actually processing what was going on, whereas before I felt I had been just sitting in awareness of whatever was around me. But anyway, I realized that thinking was taking place at that point. But I found it quite interesting because there were things going on, like I was realizing that maybe it was being guided like that, which is necessary to an extent at certain points. But it was breaking in somehow.
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Do you mean that
I mean that what I was actually making more effort. I was starting to do things, follow instructions type stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So you were sitting in a sort of spacious awareness before, but then there was a bit more attending to the specifics of what was happening.
But it was interesting for me that happened. It's interesting that happened. I mean, I think before, in a way, I had a sense of awareness where, yes, there's, you know, the room I'm sitting in, but the room I'm sitting in didn't take on that concept. It was just vibrating.
Yes.
And and the room and I were not separate.
Yeah. Okay.
There was no subject object.
Yeah.
And it just and the only way I can explain it is that I have that sense, say, when I'm watching or in the midst of a sunset, and in that sunset, I just kind of collapse out of being me. I'm part of the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, but it was interesting because I noticed the slight difference when I paid attention to your voice rather than it just being something that was there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really good. It was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Nick, you want to unmute?
Yeah. Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. I found that so beautiful. Thank you. And for me, I can't see you anymore. Sorry. The difference, or the kind of oscillating between energy and effort, and this more relaxed settling into, I think was the word you used. That to me is like the difference between wanting to practice and not wanting to practice. So I thought, God, if I could be in this more settled sitting back mode, it actually makes practice really much more enjoyable for me than the kind of going at it with the sledgehammer, like, okay, here we go. I can't see you now, so it's sort of weird. I'm talking to a space, but I love that kind of pulling of between energy and effort, and taking energy, giving energy, and then the efforts when it's sort of, I'm slightly like tightening up the screw a little bit and then letting it go again. And it reminds me a bit of someone I heard someone else say about this calm abiding, I think was a word I liked.
Okay.
Just being with and in. So I thought, God, it would be great if I could just approach my day like that more often and not go to automatic stress levels and argumentative states. But
it did sound like you were tuning into quite sort of subtle ways of feeling out energy, which can be really helpful in practice, especially in helping us see how sometimes the habitual energy is unnecessarily strong.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll hear from, maybe Jessica's got her hand up. Can unmute. And any let's open it out for any questions as well as experiences. We've just got a few more minutes, I think.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. It was really interesting. Because I always meditate with my eyes closed, it was quite effortful. So I was feeling my body, those tension points in my body tightening with trying to sustain it, just like when you try and do anything new, there's always that kind of feeling of, but there were some interesting points. So, for example, when you did the difference between hearing and listening, it did feel profoundly different. Whereas in my ordinary day, I might not have noticed that so much. But the kind of reaching for something compared with the letting it kind of come to you just was a completely different thing. I also very much noticed when I fell out of concentration with sleepiness, and also when I followed thoughts, that it just took me out of the experience. And I wouldn't necessarily have put them exactly as similar sort of things, but they were similar when I had a room in front of me. I have quite a sensitivity in my eyes, so the looking thing was quite powerful and different, but really interesting, giving me a lot to think about. And I also had that thing in mind that I remember how at a Dharma talk, someone saying, if we really unfiltered, we might be just seeing, rays of colour and, and I was thinking, will I ever break through to that kind of, lack of mind framing? But anyway, I came nowhere close to that. The chair was still the chair. But yeah, it very interesting that I had some resistance at different points and was, not.
It's a way to play with the leaning into a mode that's not so solidly conceptual, really, just playing with that. And understandable, the resistance to see, but I think it's helpful to notice that this is what resistance feels like in the mind and in the body. Fair enough, but knowing it as an object in itself, it's something that can be noticed in awareness. Thank you. Good. Patricia, with I just love watching your cat during the sessions. At one point, your cat was just sitting watching you while you were meditating for quite a long time. So you're not unmuted, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, she does this, and she's Tia, her name is, and she does this for morning meditations, actually.
Yeah.
And it's really weird because she has something to eat, goes out, has to stay in because I feed the birds, and then she sits and watches me, and sometimes she's nose to nose. It's quite funny. Yeah, can I just say, it's kind of what I felt when you said let your whole body feel stuff. I turned into this round a world. I was a world in this darkness, with all the bigger beam of the light coming into me from all different angles, with the wider feeling. But in the core was the core of me was this, the flashlight going up when you were saying things, now think of this and now think of. And obviously the obvious one was when you said we hear, but we listen, but we don't listen. I really found that quite prominent. And what came to mind was the song by Simon and Garfunkel. I forget what it's called now, but Hearing Without Listening, Sound of Silence. Yeah, yes. Sorry, it goes when I start to talk. And it really kept resonating in my mind. I went through that song. It only the bits of it, but it was, yes, the wider beam was there as this world, because you said, and it feel everything. I went into a ball rather than arms and legs. It was really quite fascinating. It was so good. So just had to say that. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes.
And you're saying I went into a ball. Did there feel like that sense that it was you, or was there a sort of
No, I was looking at the ball, but it was me. I could feel it as a sense that my arms and legs had gone and a roundness had happened, where all the bigger, I forget what the lights you called it now, the lights were coming in, and but in the core was the flashlight that kept coming out and doing the different thing. It was really quite fascinating. Really good. Yeah, thank you.
Good. Sometimes when we really attend, the perceptual apparatus sort of does get a bit sort of loosened, and we get a an experience of being in a way that is a bit sort of looser or more is different. A bit like a samapati, when the body can feel very sort of swollen and stuff. Interesting. Good. Okay, so I just have a couple of things to say before we finish this morning. Thank you all for coming again. And so a couple of things to say. One is about the retreat that's happening, the Nature of Mind retreat at Adhisthana, for those of you to whom Adhisthana is accessible, and I know that's not everybody. Buddhism and the Big Questions. 26th of August to the 2nd of September. You can camp if you want, but there's accommodation. And it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. There's a couple of new interviews from Ian McGilchrist that have been recorded with Maitreya Bandhu, and there you go. You can find out more about it there. Great team. Maitreya Bandhu, Jnanavacha, Vidyamala, Subhadramati, Jnanashura from Ireland. And yeah, if you can get there, I think it'd be wonderful. And maybe tell people who you think might appreciate it. And the other thing is just to mention Dana. There's a significant online component. Very, very good. Thank you. I hadn't spotted that. So yeah, you'll be able to follow it online if you can't get to it in person. The other thing to say, and Nick's going to put up a link in a minute, is it takes a lot of money to run these programs. The tech side of it in particular, I think just takes quite a lot of money. So if you are able to give something, that would be fantastic. And there's a link. I know Maitreya Bandhu is hoping for is that the project is able to continue into the future, but that is dependent upon, in a way, the dana being given to support it. So whatever you can give will help the continuation. I think it's a really, really valuable project with its different elements. The interview, and then the seminar, and then the taking it. It's like we take it through different levels of our being, and then it can come into the meditation in some way, integrate with our practice. So I think it's a lovely opportunity, and I hope it will continue. Okay, so we'll leave it there. Tomorrow we're going to be looking a little bit at dukkha and vukha. Which I'll say more about tomorrow. I'll say more about VUCA for those of you that aren't familiar with Dr. Jha's work. I think it's a very interesting part of her work. So we'll explore that a little bit tomorrow. And yeah, I'll see you then.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you.
Great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vajradevi.
Thank you so much, Vajradevi. Wonderful.
Okay.
Have a lovely day, everybody.
Have a great day. Yeah.
Thanks.
Or night, wherever you are.
Bye, everybody. Bye from
Bye.
Tia.
Bye.
Bye, Tia.
She's still here. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.